Vanakkam, Namaste, and blessings to everyone. This is Dr. Bhairavi Balasubramaniam, PhD, the Sky Priestess. Now, despite my best efforts, it feels like I have to do this next video. Today we are going to be talking about me. I am centering myself in this video not because I need you to put me on a pedestal or whatnot, but because it seems to me like a lot of you actually don't know what I do, why I do it, or what this space is about. And that concerns me deeply. Now, I am going to be providing links below in the commentary as to how you can find out more about who I am and what I do and why I do what I do. And if you have any pertinent or relevant questions about that, you are more than welcome to message me either using the comment boxes here or if you want to go and contact me via my website. So, this is really talking about what I am doing as a public figure in my own right in the world and why that might not exactly be what you think I'm doing. So, essentially, let's first talk about how all of this began for me. Now, I grew up, grew up is the right word. I grew up in a country that is still facing an immense problem with racism. Unfortunately, in terms of population, the numbers are not quite sufficient to mount a huge counter resistance. People just get arrested and everybody stays silent. But I grew up in a country with that kind of very, very skewed racial dynamic. And I also grew up in a family of origin who was very much involved in community and social activism at the time. And at one point, I can safely say there would not have been a single household of my ethnic group that would not have known who I was or who my family was. But because of that, I was someone who was already in the public eye as early as 5. It was not. It was not something I asked for. It was something I just kind of got pushed into from very early on. And so I always had that social and political awareness. It wasn't anything anyone indoctrinated. All I had to do was to just look at people who had the same color of skin that I did. And of course, there was a lot of insane bullying, a lot of institutional discrimination. I know some of you have heard this before, but for example, I think I was 6 or 7 years old, and there's a very simple thing like every year the kids who get the top marks in class, they get honored at an award ceremony, and literally the school refused to do that for me, even though I was the top scorer, because they literally said a dark skinned Indian girl could not possibly be more intelligent than a Chinese student. And mind you, this was a while back. Now, if I had grown up in this country now, it would be completely different. But we had to fight every single year. Just looking at my individual case, just for those very, very, very simple acts of recognition and acknowledgement. And sometimes it was worse. Sometimes it was getting locked out of the classroom by teachers just so that they could literally break my spirit. And this is the worst part. This was a private school. This was a school where, my family of origin had worked very, very, very hard to try and get me in there because they saw the same thing had happened to my brother, whom I've always argued is way cooler, way better looking, and way more intelligent and spiritual than I am. And they did not let him shine. So, despite the so called institutional protection that would have afforded me, things were still horrible. So I was about 11, and I just kind of said, screw this, screw school, I'm not going back. And I just decided to take matters into my own hands. I tried going to a high school for a year, but I saw the same things again. And long story short, I basically sat with a bunch of textbooks by myself and decided that I was going to take my high school exams before I turned 13. And I did. And I got through. And from that point onwards, I committed myself to the social organization I was working with. as and I know this sounds crazy to some of you, but that was what I was like. I was 13 and I already was doing community work and activism. I was in charge of dealing with calling people, telling people about programs, with designing flyers, with writing pamphlets for grown ass adults, because that was just the way my brain worked. I mean, for some context, my brother and I are certified Mensens, which puts our IQ in the top 2% of the world population. So we were kind of advanced in that sense. And I was already very, very committed to that, even though I was just technically a very young child. So for the next few years, I studied the organization. I watched thousands of children, tens of thousands of families as wholes, and we interacted with so many of them. We tried offering educational and social programs, we tried motivational work, we tried all kinds of things. And finally, it was decided that I had to try to go to university and college. So I did. I was about 15, and mind you, this is in Malaysia. And I got in, and some of my teachers loved me, some of my teachers were very afraid of me. I remember it was English class, and they asked me to write an essay because they wanted to go and assess the. I'm sorry about these notifications. I need to get a new phone to turn these things off. And they needed to go and try and find an essay to introduce each person and who they were. So the first thing that popped in my mind was the socio-economic effects of human immortality, because at that point I was very much into sci-fi, Isaac Asimov being my favorite author. So yeah, some of the teachers were quite scared. But some of them saw that I had potential and they wanted to wish me well in whatever I wanted to do in my life. But and some of them did not. And I remember this was during ethics class. Someone asked me to talk about Hinduism, and I grabbed the mic and I basically go, well, there's a lot of stuff about Hinduism, but there is still a very, very biased and bigoted caste system in play. And because I said that, they started putting all kinds of posters about me and whatnot and getting me to make a public apology because, mind you, I still was 15 at this time. I had a big voice and I didn't exactly know what the pushback was going to be. And this weird ass principal was trying to get me to denounce the idea that there were sunken civilizations, which there have been shown archaeologically, as a matter of record now, and that there was no idea of a Dravidian bloodline, and blah 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 blah. It was a terrible time, but this was Malaysia. So I said, okay, anything I say here is going to get me in trouble. And what I did then was I basically went, okay, so I'm going to try something else. And then I started developing programs around the principle of neuroplasticity and how we could actually help children do what I did, accelerate their education, take it into their hands, and teach them a way to actually get through an educational system that was heavily biased against them for the color of their skin. Because here, even if an Indian child is not, even if that person is smart, they will try to crush you down. At the very least, that was the way it was when I was growing up. So I developed modules, original programs, and I went and taught thousands of children. And I just hit this hard. I hit this as hard as I can. And some of our stories, some of the success stories that we found was absolutely phenomenal. Kids who had grown up from disadvantaged families, people who kind of go in the category of the lower rank of the socioeconomic tier, or kids who are involved in gangs, kids who are involved in drugs. Of course, it wasn't just all me. I was part of a team of people doing this, and but with the pedagogical tools that I was sharing, they were able to actually find confidence in their ability to learn and to take back their faith in the fact that they could score, they could excel, they could do whatever they wanted to do. And I was part of that kind of a project. But then I got in trouble again. So what happened was, at this point I was on weekly radio, national radio channel for Tamil people, because that is the mother tongue of the ethnicity I grew up into, and tens of thousands of people were hearing. And what we were doing was we were talking about, at the very least, I was talking about neuroplasticity and the brain. And remember, for context, this is me between 15 to 16. Neuroplasticity and the brain, and talking about how the educational system needed to be reformed and why it was still very, very much oriented in an old paradigm of understanding. That got me banned. So then I went, okay, this is not going to work. So, as you can see, there's already a pattern of me basically looking at things, saying what needs to be said, and not actually getting acceptance anywhere for what I'm saying, even if what I'm saying is right. And I know a lot of you will have the same experience. So then I finally went, okay, I'm going to try going overseas. And this is the nature of me. I've always been very, very, very self driven. And thankfully, this is one of the best things that happened to me. My family of origin understood that it was better to step out of my way. I remember when I was a kid, must have been 4 or 5 years old. I mean, by that point, I was already looking at theories of black holes and string theory and whatnot, and trying to understand all of this. But by that point, someone was playing around with me saying, if you don't do this, I'm going to beat you up. And it's not, in my culture, that's not an actual threat. It's people know that you're joking. Okay, it's a language thing. And I just took one look at them and I said, if you do that, I will call the cops. And I'm 4 or 5. So they kind of looked at that and they went, um, yeah, no, she's not going to listen to anything. And they kind of learned how to just stay out of my way. So, after I get banned off the radio for basically talking about facts about the educational system, then I decide that I'm going to try and make my way overseas. And because we had relatives in the US, okay, I decided to try the US. And what happened there was, and apologies for a bit of background noise, my brother's just come back from grocery shopping. Um, and so I sat for my TOEFL, ACT, whatnot, and while I was still working with the community, and I finally got an acceptance from a university now called Manchester University. I was the youngest student, and I picked it because it had observer status to the United Nations. And that's where my life changed. That's really where my life changed because, oddly enough, even though all of my actions, all of my words, my actions, all of it aligned to, things to do with social justice, things to do with pedagogy, things to do with education, my love was always astrophysics. I would hug an astronomy book when I was a kid because I saw the picture of Saturn and I was like, yay! And I suppose I was always the sky priestess. I just didn't know it. And so I actually wanted to be a theoretical astrophysicist. My cat has made noise, so she likes this point. So I went to the US and I went to this. At the time, I didn't know, I didn't have the context. It was a liberal arts college, and I was just taking an elective. And I met this really, really powerful teacher, a Nigerian professor called Benson Onyeji. And we're still in touch. We're still in touch, and my cat is doing something. Hang on. I see. Aha. Now, just for some context, the meowing is because we have just bought a toy and she really wants to look at it. And she knows when the toys are for her. But this is also how I keep myself humble. Hang on. You can wait. There we go. Okay, so as I was saying, Indiana, Manchester University, scholarship, and I basically met this professor who changed my life. And I studied, honestly, the thing that changed my life was a course on African history and North American history. And he taught me the basics of political science. So when I was reading that, my brain just exploded. And I was like, yeah, this actually makes sense with the work I've been doing in my life. This actually makes sense that there is something for me to actually learn and talk about and speak about. And I got to say, the stuff I wrote, even in terms of papers, he still has it on file because I think I better give her the toy. She knows how to hold me hostage. Just because it was something that moved me so deeply, I didn't look at it as an academic. I looked at it more in terms of poetry, politics, power and how all of it is put together. So, hang on. Come on. I know some of you are super annoyed right now, but it's okay. I'm sure you'll forgive me. So, here we go. Now, as I say, basically, it was the kind of time where I felt very, very inspired to go into the social sciences. And then I met this, they had this nuclear physicist speaking as part of a series of talks, and he said, if you want to change the world, go into the social sciences. Whatever you do is going to be co opted by someone or something or some government somewhere, and the technology that people actually need to help the people of the world is already available. And I heard this, and this made such a huge impression in my mind. Unfortunately, going to college in Indiana did not suit me. I remember this very, very clearly, this moment in Native American history class. And the professor asked all of us, do you think that Native Americans, I should actually say First Nations people, but that was what it was called there, do you think they deserve to get reparations? Me and one other guy put up our hands. Every other student was like, no. And I just kind of went, no, this is not the right place for me. So that was another moment, and I realized I just didn't fit in there either. At the time, for various reasons, I found my attention called to a research university in Germany. And you got to understand, I don't come from big money. Everything I have done is basically student debts, or it is scholarships most of the time, merit-based scholarships, but I found my way there. I accelerated a 3-year, already insanely accelerated program into 2 years, became a President's List scholar, and I enjoyed myself. The professors just knew to give me enough space to do what I wanted. I was developing models of democracy in terms of comparing the procedural versus substantive model. I had a great time learning how to salsa and belly dance. I had a great time hanging out at the student bar. It was fantastic. So, round about the age of 19, I finished that, graduated. I got accepted into a school of public policy and governance because people were impressed with what I was doing. And then I went there, and I wasn't impressed with what they were doing. So then I went, okay, this is not going to work for me. You see, this is a theme in my life. I get into places of the high profile, whatever, and I kind of realize I just don't fit there. So they were basically trying to teach me how to write memos. I'm not going to give names because I'm sure it's common to a lot of policy schools. They were trying to teach me how to write memos and to get me to understand the sophistication of the theory of muddling through. Literally a term you learn in policy sciences. I looked at this and I was like, no, this is not for me either. At that time, there was also a very traumatic event in my family of origin, and let's just say I had to go back and deal with it. So that took a year of my life. I was in Malaysia and I was in India at the time, and I had more exposure to politics on the ground, because you got to understand, just because I might be a Malaysian Tamil doesn't give me the right to speak in India either. It's not an immediate crossover, which is why I'm very sensitive to the question of who has the right to speak, when, and how. Just because you're a particular color, just because you're a particular ethnicity, doesn't mean your position reflects that of others that live in a different country, even if you're from the same genetic stock. So I'm always very sensitive to that. So I go and spend a year there, dealing with family stuff and basically taking over the household and whatnot. And then I finally decide to go back to tertiary education, because I'm bored out of my mind by this point, having finished my responsibilities in that emergency situation. So something in me just gets me to apply to a PhD program, and I get in. They're like, okay, you don't have a master's, but you've got the research skills, so come and join. And this was a scholarship to the University of Warwick. And it was on a program to study gender, ceremony, and rituals in parliaments. So I go, and it takes me 5 years of my life, through most of the time through which I was actually really ill. Otherwise, I would have finished that in about 2 years. It wasn't that difficult. It was just I was really ill for a lot of the time. I had to go do field research in India, and I got really sick. And because I had been pushing it so hard, especially with the family stuff, the emotional stuff, the political stuff, jumping from country to country by myself from the age of 16, I was already exhausted. And I had 1 year just blown off into nothingness because I was chronically fatigued and I had no idea what that meant. And that is also why I'm very sensitive to the fact that just because a person knows intellectual shit does not mean that they know anything about emotions or spirituality or anything else. You know, you can literally just be hyper functional in one domain of your life and be a complete moron in everything else. And I'm not going to lie to you. I was, and have said this before in other spaces, my cat is here to give me comfort, so that's why I'm scratching her. I was certainly very strongly exhibiting traits of someone on the Asperger autism spectrum. Both of us did, both me and my brother did as kids. But that was how we were so unusually focused. But again, you got to understand, this was over 30 years ago. Now people would get this. But then people would have thought we were weird, crazy, anomalous, or like I found in my college in Malaysia, just frightened. Like, what are these creatures? Where do they come from? So when I had an entire year breakdown during my first year of the PhD, and I remember I had this very cruel supervisor, um, who, well, she was a white woman studying India, and thinking that she had, the right to talk about it as if she knew anything, and from a lived perspective. And I actually had a off my case of that because she didn't understand the fact that I was going through something terrible. But it was the kind of energy where I just realized I had to look at something different. Now, I know, notice I haven't said anything about spirituality or religion. Alongside all of this, and it's already enough being hyper intelligent in a racist ass society, not having anyone around me to be able to talk about it. My brother's already in his own bubble of dealing with his trauma from his experience of the educational system, which is totally legit because there was no words for this. On top of that, the universe decided to gift me with psychic knowledge, which, if you think about it, is fucking cruel, but it is, and it happened. So when I was a kid, I just knew things. I knew, like before someone would announce a discovery of something in NASA, I was always connected to space. I was like, they're going to call it. Within 6 months later, that particular discovery would come out. Or in a more immediate situation, if someone would have lied to me, I would have dreams helping me understand that what I heard was a lie. Or if someone was about to die, and I can still do it. If someone's about to die, I will be able to see that it's coming. And this was something that was just always with me as a child. And I always had this deeper connection, deeper knowing to something that nobody in my family of origin understood because they were all socio-political atheists. In fact, my name is actually the name of a goddess. Now, don't go into that track. I'm not calling myself an incarnation, avatar, goddess, whatever. But they actually didn't know it. They just thought it was a musical scale, and so they named me because they were all atheists. And so there was no way for me to explore that. But when I had my year-long breakdown and subsequent field trips to India and subsequent awakenings, because really, when you are used to being a powerhouse, ill health and literally not being able to move by yourself in a foreign country really makes you humble very quick. So I began to actually learn like what on earth was going on. What was I feeling? What was I seeing? Unfortunately, I don't know if it's a privilege or a curse, I had the opportunity to meet a terrible teacher. I was alone, vulnerable, young, by myself, looking for family in a foreign land, but I found someone deeply abusive, deeply traumatizing, and I learned exactly how not to respond to spirit and how not to conduct yourself. But yeah, this was, it's been shit if you think about it. I haven't caught a break ever since I was born. But it's the kind of energy where I was having that chronic fatigue response. I was just breaking down, and I didn't have any guides. So I tried my best. I tried looking into homeopathy, massage, spirituality, whatever it was that could get me back on track. And it was a 5 year journey, partially in India, partially in England because of the research. I'm not even going to get into the topic of relationships because no. That one just no. That just took everything to a whole other depth. But eventually I did finish. I think one of the reasons why, because even as I was submitting my thesis, my hand was in a cast because I was in a relationship with domestic abuse and violence. And, when I finally submitted it, it was such a relief. But I didn't know what to do next. And I just kind of thought, okay, I'm probably going to go into a postdoc or whatever. And this is something I never mentioned before, but I had such a traumatizing experience, not just in my institution of higher learning in the UK, where even though there were three women of color on the team, they basically threw me under the bus for every other white person in the room, which is really shit. Like literally, this might sound petty to you, but I'll give you an idea. I was the youngest person on the project, which is the theme, and our project was also focused on the British Parliament. So these people are just centering around this one person, going, "Oh, she's so smart, she's so young," and this is actually a person who's 1 year older than me, and me and the project manager are just looking, "Excuse me, hello, hello," but we didn't say anything. But that's a very small, petty part of it. The thing that really hurt my feelings was at the end of the project, they give a document where all of the project contributors' names are listed. And the white woman who was doing this didn't even bother to check my name. It looked like it was some, I mean, I'm not even going to insult any culture, but it looked something more like a Polish name than anything to do with India. She didn't even spell check it, she put it into print. When I had to submit my chapter for the collected anthology, they tried to rewrite it. So I had a terrible experience in higher education and academia. So I realized, yet again, this is not a fit. So I didn't know what to do. Any space that I was trying to go into, either I was too young, too female, too brown, not black enough, not white. Anywhere I went, I had this same problem. And I'm not going to pretend and say that, I have found a solution to this because I have not. So, this is a kind of situation where I didn't know what the next part of my journey was going to take me to. So I went back to Malaysia, recovering from domestic violence and not being able to use the right side of my body, and basically having my joints all thrown out of balance in a sling, and I did not know what to do with my life. And then all of a sudden, one day, and I was thinking, because I was like, okay, I'm Indian, I should try and follow that spiritual path, I should own the goddess in my name. And I tried starting a Facebook page on that just to share ideas and so on and so forth. That was called The Goddess, the Serpent, and the Sea, Building Pathways of Light. I started that. And then all of a sudden, one day, things changed. I thought, finally, I have found my groove. And I fell asleep one day, and then I woke up. And when I woke up, I knew astrology. And it's like, oh, how do I know this? What's going on now? It was like a direct download. And I didn't know what to do with it. Here I am, Dr. Bhairavi, finished my PhD at 25, supposed to be a community icon, going into a field where everyone's going to laugh at me. What am I going to do? And I didn't know what to do because I felt kind of caught in the middle as usual. Do I go down the political spiritual path? Do I go into, what do I do? Which road do I take? So I kept silent for a while, and a friend of mine at this time on Facebook, she outed me. She called me Priestess Bhairavi. And I was like, shit, no one's supposed to know. And she's like, oh no, I'm so sorry. And then I kind of went, you know what, maybe it's a sign from the universe. And then I owned it. Um, but as you can see, none of this was planned. None of this was, something that I didn't ask for this. I really didn't ask for this, nor did my brother, who has his own challenges. Um, and So that began a thing. And then I spent 7 years of my life on Facebook, which I know sounds terrible, but it was 18-hour days. I don't want you people to think that, it's just a page and she's running a business and she's successful. No, this was 18-hour days of community building through the page, through my personal profile, tens of thousands of conversations with people from an immense, diverse range of race, color, creed, education. And I was talking to everybody, and we built a thing. For those of you who have migrated from Facebook, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We actually built something really, really powerful. And you're probably wondering, why did she leave that? You know, I think you've got the gist of my story from now. Even the moment I think I've actually got something, Spirit then intervenes to say, well, it's time for you to go look at something else. So 7 years down the line, I've gone and I've been working my ass off, and it's most of this is unpaid. It's unpaid labor. It's a labor of love, and I finally think, hey, I found my purpose in the world. But then, round about 2016, 2017, I realized that yet again, Spirit has decided that I'm supposed to be doing something else. Not so much give up the astrology, but it is about recognizing the fact that there was a reason why I had the struggles that I did. There was a reason why I was pushed into political science and did not just go into theoretical astrophysics, which is what I wanted to do. My calculus teacher was upset. She really liked me. And it, it was to actually merge the two. And everyone was fine with me until they realized the Sky Priestess is actually Dr. Bhairavi Balasubramanian, PhD. That's why I always say those words together. Now, some of you might think it's ego, some of you might think that she's showing off. Excuse me, there are many successful black PhDs out there. And I'm not saying I'm the only one who did this. Black, brown, you know what I'm saying. There are many successful minority women out there, which actually reminds me of something I did want to say, why I felt academia was so bad for me. Even on the day of my graduation, I have this upper middle class white British woman going, oh, did you have problems speaking English and learning English? I'm like, no. My mother went to a convent school. I've spoken it since I was a child. And then because, her kid was getting a bachelor's, the bachelor's gown and the PhD gown are very, very different. So the PhD gown looks stunning at the University of Warwick. I would buy it, like, if I had a use for it. It's beautiful. And she goes, did you borrow that? And I'm going, this is the gown for the PhD students. But she was just so pissed her son didn't have the same gown. And I'm walking around and I keep seeing people glaring at me, and I'm thinking to myself, what is this? And even Indian people are kind of looking at me like this, because it's weird. Indian people automatically assume I'm African unless I say I'm from South India. And South Indian people wonder, are you from Sri Lanka? And Sri Lankan people go, Africa? And African people go, maybe my neighboring state. Never fit in nowhere. Only Ethiopians are like, you look like my sister. At least that's what I've found. Which is one of the reasons why I do want to visit Ethiopia at some point. It would be nice to be in a place where, I didn't get that. Who are you? What are you? Where are you from? And I do have an interest in Ethiopian history. But you got to understand that me, I'm not just sitting here reading some book about astrology. This is years of social work, political work, cultural studies, religious studies, ethnography, sitting with spirit, layer after layer after layer of refinement, and getting pushed and pushed and pushed. I've covered many continents, many, many, many different continents in my relatively short span of life. And spirit has just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. So, let me tell you why I left Facebook. And it wasn't just because I went, oh, Facebook is so bad. There are some deeper esoteric reasons, but I want to focus on the ones that are more relevant for the purposes of why I decided to do this video, because I realize a lot of you don't know me. You might have found me from some other place, and maybe you think, she's a cool astrologer, but there's a lot more to the package. So on Facebook, and I know, and I'm not saying this because I want you to believe what I believe. I want you to be really clear about this. I am totally okay with people who have different views. You know, I will still be myself to you, if even if you decide to believe in whatever the heck the Republicans are spewing in the US right now. It's that's your job, that's your journey, that's your path. But what I found intolerable was the fact that here I had spent 7 years of my life. And you got to understand, for my lifespan, that's about something like a quarter of my life, investing into a community. And the moment I actually start to open my mouth about politics, it becomes attack the sky priestess. The same person whom everyone respected, they're like, yes, you're on a pedestal, yes, you have wise knowings. It was, no, 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 please don't talk, you're going into lower frequencies. It was, no, 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 you haven't done this work, no, 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 you're not intelligent enough. The same person on such a powerful pedestal came not even tumbling down, but people tried to make it happen if I said something that wasn't, in alignment with their policies. And the thing that really started to make me feel as though I was a complete and utter failure at what I had tried to do on Facebook was Greta Thunberg and the Parkland kids. And I don't care whether you think she's a Soros, CIA shill, or whatever, nothing, I repeat, nothing gives the person a right to demonize a child or a teenager. It doesn't matter. Even if that kid was programmed, she's still a kid. And what I had found that all of these people talking about, spirituality just could not get that. What is the point of spirituality if it lacks empathy and compassion? And I didn't want to feed that. So okay, a lot of people left at that point. And then, by that point, I was also kind of parting ways with the larger goddess slash priestess movement because, as I wrote in an article, I think now 6 years ago, God is not in the gonads. We don't need to look at the division of masculine and feminine as the only way we see, energy moving through this reality. As far as I know, I am a straight, cisgender female, but I don't see spirit and the image of the goddess as exclusively in a body that looks like mine, or a body that has a womb, or a body that, has that set of secondary sexual characteristics. And so, the goddess priestess movement wanted me to be their token black slash brown person of an exotic culture. And I basically just said, no, I'm not doing it unless you recognize that divinity does not require you to identify your secondary sexual characteristics as a means of accessing energy in one way or another. So that was something that I very subtly put forward. I did not step up as much as I could simply because I was still trying to create a space that was spiritual and did not get me into the political muck. I thought that's why I finished my PhD and I was done with it. But again, the universe decided something different. So when more and more people decided to talk about transgender rights, and how in particular certain branches of feminism were rejecting transgender rights entirely, I spoke up about it. And I found that really caused a lot of discord. That really caused a lot of backlash. And it's not that I'm afraid of backlash because, honey, I'm talking to you just about physical obstacles. The metaphysical obstacles I have faced in my life are probably 10 to 20 times harder than the physical ones. So I'm not afraid of that shit. I'm not afraid of any of it. But what I did find is a sense of I felt I had failed in my objective. That much of energy, that much of time, that much of love, and people still were not getting it. They just wanted the Sky Priestess. They were Sky Priestess fans. They're people who just wanted to see me as their teacher, their savior, their mother, whatever the role was. And I was just like, this is not what it's about, people. If you're walking on a path that has me on it, you got to be walking on it with your heart. And when you walk a path with your heart, that means being able to show love and compassion for anybody, whether even if it's a child or a teenager you think is a puppet of some whatever. Believe me, I've been looking into the conspiracy theories. They don't make sense to me either. They ultimately come down to hearsay. I'm looking for evidence. I'm the kind of person who, even if I really believe in something, I will look at the counter for what I believe in because that's research. That's academic training. You don't just look for things that confirm your own biases. You have to look at things that, in fact, could even delegitimize what you think. That's the difference between just following something blindly and being willing to have an open mind. So, even if I don't agree with something, I will still look at it and I will still process it and I will still think about it and I'll still look for sources because that's what I do. So, when it came to this, I realized that there was nothing I could do, that this infection was spreading through the community, especially on Facebook, and people were just getting more and more and more polarized. So I went, you know what? I think more and more people are trying to use my space and platform to try and push these other fringe agendas. And I realized that Facebook was also censoring me very, very heavily. Because the moment I talked about, First Nations rights and Standing Rock, especially with respect to certain recent ex-candidates of the presidency, Facebook really blocked me even more, and I just kind of went, I can't do this. And you got to understand, it was a much, much wider audience. It was a much larger audience, and I left it. Do you realize how much money I could make off of everybody if I just kind of went? And this is my best impression of it. Yes, behold the divine white light. I see it now. Behold the Neptunian rays coming through. Yes, Neptune is speaking to us today. I shall now ring a bell. Do you realize how much money I could have made with this? Or how much of an international following I could have generated with this? It's insane, because literally people will believe anything, and I'm just like, I can't do that. I just cannot do it. And I know some of you find that threatening, which you should, especially if you're running a scam of people in the name of spirituality. And some of you might find that invalidating if I ask you for evidence, if I ask you to present your perspective. And that's also okay, because people are not used to holding others accountable for what they are saying in the public domain. And this is what I despise about modern day spirituality. Anyone can say anything and get away with it. I can't, because even if you don't judge me, whatever my spirit guides are there will just be like, excuse me. And I have found that even if I walk a little bit out of alignment with what I'm supposed to be doing, the backlash is so hard, it's not worth walking out of alignment. So, I am answerable to my higher up, so to speak. And unfortunately, a lot of people do not feel the same way. They do not hold themselves accountable for what they're saying. They will not take the responsibility of the space and the platform and the centrality that is focused on them. And yeah, that probably means I part ways with even more people than I realized. So when I came to YouTube and decided to try and center my work here, it's funny. I had someone from the Facebook group write to me recently saying how they were leaving and they didn't feel like they could speak or be heard. And of course, this is a white lady denying the fact that she's got white fragility. I basically said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you think of me. It doesn't matter whether you're in my space or not. That's not going to change the fact that racism exists in this world. And people find that very threatening, because they assume that if they like me, I must have a reciprocal relationship, or I must then allow them to project whatever shit they want to project. And I'm just like, no, that doesn't work. But I wanted to give you context, because really, people do not know who I am. People do not know what I stand for or what my journey has been. Part of that is also a bit my fault, just because I've not shared this very often, but it's also because weirdos project things. They project things in very, very weird ways to justify very weird theories. And I was just like, so most of the time I play my cards very close to my chest. But this one I felt I needed to say. I needed to say because it needed saying. And I know some of this is, you're like, well, why should I care? Just tell me about the astrology. But really, if you just want the astrology, go somewhere else. This isn't a place where people can just escape reality by trying to hide behind the stars. It's very easy to pedestalize the sky priestess because she's talking about a sky that's very, very far away. But it's very hard to talk to Dr. Bhairavi, who's talking about what's happening with your life, with you, in your face, in the here, in the now. I really wonder if this life is worth it. But, I'll have to look at my guides and figure out, what are you people doing now? Why did I come here? I don't claim to have all the answers, and I never will, because nobody does. Reality is always changing, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to be as accountable for who you are, what you say, what you do in the world, how you do it, why you do it. Be accountable would be the key message of this. You don't have to share all of yourself, like some parts of your life are just private because it's your business. But when you are talking about stuff that matters, that creates a cultural, spiritual, or political impact in another person's mind, yes, hold yourself accountable. I mean, one of the things that really dismayed me was I actually saw a lot of people, and I know I'm on a roll right now, and the moment I say this, I'm going to get a couple of angry comments. But I heard people saying, "Oh no, how George Floyd, who's basically being focused on by the Black Lives Matter movement now," and I absolutely accept that Breonna Taylor should be equally centered. But some people are saying that George is alive. So I just looked at the camera and I went, well, if he's alive, tell him to come home. I'm sure his family misses him. The thing about dealing with, sharing any kind of information on a platform like this is that anyone can say anything and get away with it because they hide behind a screen. And sometimes the people who are publicly speaking are saying things to get them cult like status or fringe followers or people who are willing to believe anything that's not what the mainstream is saying, because that makes them feel special. And again, if any one of these people who are sharing these ideas, who are sharing these theories, they need to come forth and say it. I mean, would any of those people look that man's child, his little daughter, in the eye and say, "Hey girl, your daddy's a fraud, he's alive somewhere"? Would they actually do it? No, because there's no cost to them saying what they're saying, except they get more followers, they get more people willing to go down the rabbit hole with them, and that sucks. And to be honest, that's not what spirituality should be about. If whatever path you're following, if whatever road you are walking on, if whatever teacher you're following is not actually taking you to a space of greater compassion for human beings, starting with the people who are most trodden on, you got to ask yourself, what are you doing? But that's why I've shared what I've shared about myself today, because I realize a lot of you are still projecting stuff on me. And hopefully, this gives you an understanding of what this space is about and what I am about. And I am more than willing and happy to answer respectful, on point questions. Any stuff that's making slanderous allegations about myself or anyone else without evidence, without proof, it'll be deleted and that person will be banned because I don't have time for that. If you want to have a dialogue, I'm right here and I'll respond to you in time and energy permitting. So that's about it. Take care. Many, many, many blessings to all of you. Giving a shout out to all of you. And I got to get back to my doing work for my tier 23 stuff because that's where the astrological core of my work is. Eventually, I'm sure I'll be doing something else because Spirit just does not seem to let me settle on one thing. But for now, here's where it is. So take care. Very many blessings and cha cha to now. Peace out. Bye bye.